The future of impact runs on data and stories. Hi there, a new face here at Rad Solutions Lab. I'm Andreina Weichselbaumer, Senior Director of Strategy and Culture at Radical Partners. And I'm really excited to host another episode of this mini series where we share innovative solutions that will spark change and transform the current state of the social impact sector. And today we're talking about a trending topic that we just want to see more of in our social impact space, and that is technology and smart infrastructure to do more, better, faster, so that we can drive our missions forward. For that, we have Drew Payne with us today. Drew brings a rich background spanning education, health, community development, and social impact investing. Before launching UpMetrics, he founded UHV Group, advising Blackstone portfolio companies, and also serves as leadership of the Payne Family Foundation. A San Francisco native and a proud University of Pennsylvania graduate, Drew is really passionate about using technology to advance equity and impact. Drew, really happy to have you here today. I recognize that through your leadership at UpMetrics, you and your team are really equipping mission driven organizations with the tools to harness data. It's a big feat, not only to measure impact, but also to strengthen their storytelling, to attract resources, all in the interest of amplifying the positive change that they're driving in their communities. So, with that powerful background and the incredible work that you're leading at UpMetrics, I'd love to start at that big picture level. Tell us more about your work at UpMetrics and make that connection for us. How is technology boosting the impact of leaders and their organizations?
Well, Andreina, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here and partner up and create some shared learning space. And from an metrics perspective, we've always been anchored in relationships and information. And if we can connect the dots and have organizations leverage their data, both the quantitative and qualitative, we can help create more learning to drive more impact within communities, in addition to leverage that data and relationships to package that information to activate and inspire others to get behind mission driven organizations that are making a difference. And so, how we do that is technology and team. And it starts with centering the nonprofits who are doing the work and giving them the tools, empowering them with those tools to define success, collect the information, leverage it internally, and then share it out to bring others towards their work to make a difference.
What a powerful system. Thank you for putting so much thought into packaging that for folks. Something that you mentioned about relationships makes me think about the role that funders play in this space. If you had a group of funders in a room today and you had the position of advocating for organizations, what would you tell them to encourage their investment in stronger, more relevant tech infrastructure for social impact ventures?
It's interesting with the hats that I wear. And so I'm a grant maker, I'm an impact investor. I've had experience in terms of direct service with nonprofits. And then I'm leading up metrics, which is anchored on data and technology and supporting mission driven groups that are taking on social and environmental change. I think one of the challenges for the grant maker community is thinking about their investments in short term versus long term lens. And sometimes as a grant maker, we want to fund initiatives or programs and see outcomes in very short periods of time versus thinking about longitudinal impact tied to the infrastructure that's needed for the nonprofits to do great work and learn through their work. And so I think that having grant makers think more long term about their investments is one thing that's really important. Also recognizing that the demand for technology and infrastructure is at an all-time high for nonprofits. But we need to create the space and allocate the resources for the nonprofits to be able to leverage the technology and an infrastructure to do their work, which means we as grant makers have to actually invest intentionally in those areas. And I think that it's been under-resourced to date for a variety of reasons. But I think that the grant makers, if we could start to think more long term and also ask the nonprofits what they could best leverage from a technology and infrastructure perspective and align that to your portfolio strategy and start to pilot things and give it an opportunity then learn through those pilots to actually allocate those funds towards technology and infrastructure. And we'll see, I think, a big difference through the learnings that the nonprofits have. And it'll create more sustainability relative to those nonprofits because they have the infrastructure, the tools, and the data to drive their work forward because of those investments by the grant makers.
That is so powerful. Thank you for mentioning it. You shared about this process of co-creating between the
Mhm,
funders and organizations.
mhm.
And of course, there are so many layers to that. I'm curious to hear, like, what is your favorite story to tell now that this shift is happening? We're driving in that direction.
Mhm.
Um, Tell us about a time when a funder's investment in tech really paid off.
Well, I'll talk about a recent visit to Southeast Michigan. So I'm based in San Francisco, and we work with a lot of different organizations directly, and we also look to focus on place-based models. And so one of the communities that we've decided to really make an intentional investment in relative to UpMetrics is Southeast Michigan through our partnership with the Balmer Group. And so through a grant via the Balmer Group, we've supported 30 nonprofits across 3 counties that wanted to leverage technology and create more connectivity within their community because we can't do this work alone. And so one of the things that we want to do is to break down the silos across organizations, whether it's nonprofit to nonprofit, grant maker to nonprofit, or grant maker to grant maker. And so we launched a community initiative in Southeast Michigan, started to work with those nonprofits directly, and started with how they're defining success. And so when we talk about co creation, who defines what success is? Because we all want to make a difference. And that aligns to our strategies, mapped to our issue areas, generally mapping to lived experience. I'm a big believer that the nonprofits that are in the communities delivering the programs and services need to have a seat at the table to define what success is relative to their delivery model. And so in Southeast Michigan, we brought grant makers together to learn through the work of the nonprofits and how they were defining success. And to see the grant makers, and we call them impact frameworks, actually see and process the impact frameworks that the 30 nonprofits had defined as their success measures really, I think, had some light bulb moments for the grant makers to say, wow, this is how our nonprofit community is defining what success is tied to their model. How do we actually support them and accelerate their work as a funding partner? And so you have to kind of lead by example and have some case studies and learn in public what works, what doesn't work. But that one resonated because you could see some of the co creation and the light bulbs come on once folks started to see the information presented via the eyes of the nonprofits that were directly servicing those communities.
That is so powerful, and there are so many things built into that, right? Like, there's this culture of, collaborating in new spaces, and making room really for diverse perspectives. I can imagine all of the diverse measures of success and impact evaluation that come from 30 different organizations. Like, that really is such a huge feat.
Yeah, and this is an example of the demand. So when we went into the communities, 100 nonprofits signed up for the initiative. We ended up selecting 30. And so one of the challenges is I feel like sometimes the grant makers might not recognize like the real interest for the nonprofits to leverage technology in addition to the learning space. We all talk about creating learning space and how important it is to learn through our work, but if we as grant makers don't invest in the learning space and provide that via grants that are flexible or can anchor to building up that infrastructure specifically, it's tough for the nonprofits to sometimes like level up outside of the tactile work that they have to take on that's really difficult on a day-to-day basis. But if we as grant makers can invest in that space, and Radical Partners is all about community connection, you are building that, but we need the funders to actually allocate the resources. But the demand is there from the nonprofits. And then we, as kind of multipliers in terms of our work, need to showcase what's working and what's not working. So then we can get more resources to invest in those types of initiatives.
You're watching Radical Solutions Lab. Stick around, there's a lot more ahead.
We decided to have this series because we want to inspire more of us to have deeper, research informed conversations that inspire change. We want to bring value to our friends new and old in our ecosystem, so we hope to keep having these conversations with you. Share your best practices and tips in the comments below. If you've learned something new, sharing that inspires others to do the same. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel for more conversations like this.
And we are back with Radical Solutions Lab.
Let's shift a little bit from the funder perspective to the organizations themselves. Some folks are already leveraging tech to really drive and amplify the work that they're doing. Some are really starting to step into this space for the first time. So, when
Mhm.
leaders are deciding how to invest in technology, what do you think are some of the most important considerations?
Well, I think what's the challenge that we're trying to solve with the technology? I think that we've all been in organizations where sometimes we rush to implement a technology, a system, and then at the end of the day, it doesn't get operationalized. And then you say, well, why did I just invest this amount of time or money into that system? So it has to start with the why and what's the pain point that we're looking to solve. I'd also say that there's such a strong community across the nonprofits that are doing the work, learn from each other, right? And so I think that if we can elevate the challenges that we're looking to take on as nonprofits and then talk through what the solutions specifically are that map to the pain points that we're looking to address, and then learn in more public spaces, that will help organizations be able to identify the right solution for the right challenge and then actually operationalize it. So it's not a one time project that may or may not work. It's sustainable, it's long term, and you get the buy in from your teammates within your organization upfront, which then leads to long-term success relative to the implementation.
Brilliant. Yeah, it requires I love what you said about operationalizing it. Like, it really requires building it into the organization so that it can be a sustained effort. That really resonates so much. And I know for many of the leaders listening that there is a bit of that tension. They care deeply about impact, and technology can sometimes feel overwhelming or out of reach, or they're not quite certain where to start. And so your guidance is really helpful in guiding folks to lay that groundwork and really see how it can be deeply embedded.
Yeah,
And
and I think
yeah,
there's also a challenge around, let's just invest as grant makers into technology, but we're not thinking about the people.
Mhm.
The solutions is only as good as the people that are leveraging it, right? So it's not just about let's use this technology and it costs this amount of money to do this and this amount of time to implement it. It's really the people. So we have to invest in the people, get the buy-in, and then make sure there's the capacity and the training for learning on an ongoing basis after the implementation side of it, not just during the implementation process. So I think there's probably an education across, the nonprofits and the grant makers that we have to invest both in the technology and the team because historically the line items and the budgets haven't been there around technology and team to actually make this successful long term. And that's where I do think multi-year grants, flexible grants are really important. So we don't just throw technology at a challenge. We actually think about the people who are going to be utilizing it and making sure everyone understands why this technology is important as a multiplier that might take a little bit of time to get the value from.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, relationships take nurturing and building for sure. And part of a big movement is building those trust-based relationships with
Mm.
funders. And so like this is a piece, it is a vehicle to drive that. And then also that the mindset shift is also so powerful. Like we are shifting mindsets across many of these different layers. And so we recognize that it takes a lot of effort and sustained effort in that to continue driving this
And
move.
and for the nonprofit leaders out there, try to make it fun, right? And try to anchor it in the why, because right now we're all a bit overwhelmed, especially here in the US. There's a lot of volatility. There's a lot of friction. And so our headspace can only take on so much new, right? And so we really need to anchor into why this is important and then bring your team along for that journey, anchored in the value that it's going to create and try to bring the energy and the fun around it versus it's just another technology or another tool that we have to implement. You really need to get the buy-in from the stakeholders within your organization to have it be successful, especially during these times.
Yeah. UpMetrics does that so well. I'm so glad to have you as a partner in
We're
this.
trying. We're trying. We're out. We're doing it.
Yeah. What I'm hearing from you, Drew, is that technology isn't about that singular investment or about efficiency. It's also about unlocking relationships, stories, shifting that culture, and also really fueling equity in the sector and having that co-creation and that innovation happen at every stage.
No, absolutely.
If we were to share one simple practical step organizations can take to start using technology better in their work, say starting tomorrow, what
Mm.
would you say that would be?
I think that right now, the focus on diversified funding for the nonprofit community is very top of mind with here in the US, the government shifts on and the uncertainty tied to resource allocation. So I think a practical element to deciding to use technology needs to anchor in your internal assessment as to what's most critical for the work that you're taking on. Is it to create more learning internally? And what are the tools, the technology that we can drive on to create more learning space within our organization? Is it to diversify our funder community? What do we need to be able to do to make that happen? And how can technology support? So I think that starting with your organization and your strategy and what your short-term and medium-term focus areas are really help then inform the tools, the technology, and the infrastructure investments that are needed to work through this point in time as an organizational leader. And so I would start with what is most critical, have some really open, upfront conversations with your teams, and then apply that to what tools do we need in order to meet those goals that we have operationally, and then go through that next phase of assessment. Okay, what tools are actually out there to deliver on those pain points that can meet the moment for the organization that we're taking on?
Brilliant. Let's set those priorities, folks.
Not easy, right? Goal
It's
setting
not.
is
It's
tough.
not easy.
It has to start with, our vision, our mission, and what our goals are, short term, medium term, and then do we have the tools, the processes, the team in place to make it happen, and then go from there.
Always grounding it in the mission first and foremost. Well, Drew, thank you so much for sharing your insights. It was great to get nerdy with you about this. I'm sure we've inspired folks to use technology to amplify their impact and to continue driving equity in this space. So, for anyone listening who wants to learn more or connect with UpMetrics, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
Well, you can reach out to me directly, drew at upmetrics.com. You could also check out our website at upmetrics.com, and we've got a contact us workflow there, but you can learn more about our work and either reach out to me directly, or we've got some tools on our website that you can find a way to reach out to our team, and then we'll circle back and get to know you a little bit more about the work that you're taking on in communities, and see if there's a partnership fit.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Drew.
All right, thanks.
Thanks so much for tuning in. And until next time, keep pushing for bold solutions, powerful relationships, and exploring how tech can help amplify your impact. To learn more about UpMetrics, connect with them by looking in the show notes. There, you'll also find how to subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us at Radical Partners social media handles, and sign up to our newsletter.